agreeing with AOC. Like, ugh.
Brett Cooper and Pattie Gonia politically could not be more different.
Better be a fascist!
For drill, baby, drill. The oil is coming back. This is great. And honestly, like, that is exactly why I voted for him. That is what I would like to hear.
But what if I told you that they found common ground on a really important issue?
And I love an unlikely duo. I think that's what we need. I think the world needs Brett Cooper and Pattie Gonia.
That moment wouldn't have happened without this guy.
And I'm just hoping that someday people will look back and say, Benji, you weren't that crazy, because right now they think I am.
That's Benji Backer, and he believes that it's not just Pattie and Brett, but that all Americans, all of us, actually agree on some really basic issues, like clean air, clean water, and protecting nature. But there's just one problem: partisan politics.
Senators, lobbyists, special interest groups, they've all assumed the worst. I've just completely come to the conclusion that the political boxes are bullshit. So my goal is to kind of create an Avengers.
This all seems horrible.
Of people who believe in the environment and are fighting together, side by side, who believe the same things and just come from different walks of life.
I'm Chase Cain, Emmy Award-winning meteorologist and environmental journalist, and I talked with Benji about his new campaign, United by Nature, and its big plans from Teton to Times Square.
Benji, thanks for talking with me. I have to start with a question that you maybe didn't see coming. I'm curious if
That's how we're starting?
Yeah, we're starting here, because in
Starting
another
hot.
life, I want to know if you could come back to Earth as something else in nature, not human, plant, animal, rock, whatever. What would it be?
I would want to be an elf owl.
An elf owl. Why?
It's the smallest owl and one of the smallest birds. I'm kind of small. I'm 5'9".
But for elf owls, size truly doesn't matter.
I was the smallest girl or guy in my elementary school for a really long time. So I had a huge growth spurt because now I'm average. That's a huge win for me. But also they live in saguaros, which is one of my favorite plants. If you don't know what a saguaro is, it's the infamous cacti that everyone uses when they're talking about the Southwest. The one with
The cactus emoji. Yeah.
It's the cactus emoji. Yep. Yeah. They should have other cactus emojis. That's a hot take right there. Apple, if you're listening. But because there are other cacti out there. But they live in saguaros. They fly around. They migrate. They go to all different places. They live in the mountains. And they're super cute. And I also want to be cute. So it's cute, small, live in the mountains. Perfect.
For some reason, I feel like you've been asked this question before, because you
I
like
haven't.
have that answer ready.
I was ready for that, though.
I love it. So what do you see? I mean, this is kind of like a bigger picture, maybe like a deeper thing, but like, what is the relationship between people and nature? How do you see that?
Well, I think we've lost it completely. You know, the natives really got it right, where they realized that we are completely reliant on nature to survive, and then we have this completely symbiotic relationship. They knew that before science told us that. So first natives realized it, then science told us it, and now we've forgotten native and scientific knowledge because we're so wrapped up in the news of the day and the technology and ordering stuff on Amazon and, you know, just living our day-to-day lives that we've kind of forgotten that nature is the one thing that sustains us, that the circle of life, the cycle of life, the reliance on biodiversity is inherently why humans can survive. And so, yes, we need a balance. We need a balance of developing resources and protecting nature, because we don't have the lives that we have without extracting some sort of resources from the earth. But we can't just do that endlessly and without thought. And I think that what the world has come to today is that we're doing it endlessly without thought. And unfortunately, a lot of environmentalists, to curb that, have gone to the opposite side to say, because of that, we need to shut down industry. We need to shut down the economy. We need to ban certain things. But then that turns people off because they rely on those things to survive too, whether that be their gas stove or their car, or the things that are being threatened to be taken away, or at least perceived to be threatened to be taken away. And we need to help Americans and the whole world, honestly, reconnect with the need to balance resource development and the environment. So natives got it right first. And then you had someone like Teddy Roosevelt who really understood that in a much more modern age. I guess modern at the time, is not so modern anymore. But
More than a century
years
ago. Yeah,
he
been
realized,
a little while.
over 100 years ago, he realized that you need both. And so he was not against extraction of resources, but he absolutely was not for the endless extraction of resources. And that symbiotic relationship is something that if we don't realize at some point in the next couple of decades, at the very least, humanity will fail. The world will survive. Humanity will fail.
So how do you think we're doing as a country in the US? Like, what's your report card for how we're doing in terms of caring for nature, caring for our environment?
So what's interesting is that the US, despite what a lot of people think, was actually the gold standard for a really long time. We were the ones lowering the emissions the most worldwide. We had the best public land system. Yes, we screwed over the environment during the Industrial Revolution, but we're making things better. Unfortunately, over the last couple of decades, we've started to failing again. So I would give us previously like a B. You know, we were doing well, but we had room for improvement. And I'd say that we're down to a C, and we're trending downwards. We still have public lands. We still are restoring some wildlife populations. Emissions are not going up as much as they are in other countries, but all of those things are getting worse now than they were before. And we are sort of trending towards that over extraction mindset of like we have endless resources, which is sort of how the world used to think. Like when you're an explorer and you get to America, it basically looks endless, right? You're like, I can cut down this tree, I can cut down 1 million trees, and there's still going to be 1 million left. Well, now we know that that's not true, especially with a population of 7 to 8 billion people. And I think we're kind of falling victim for that again. But unfortunately, now the stakes are even higher because the population is so much higher and we've extracted so much already. And we're shipping things around the world as if it's candy. I mean, we have, you can go on Amazon, and I'm complicit in this too. I went online the other day, I lost a charger, and I got a new charger shipped to me overnight for $7. And I thought to myself, what did it take to do that? And I only had to pay $7 for it, And so I think that we've kind of forgotten the connection between our consumption behavior, our day-to-day behavior, and the environment. And most people will be like, well, why does that matter? We have much more pressing issues. We have inflation, we have national debt, we have immigration issues. All those are short-term issues for the most part, as in we can and will solve them, hopefully. And they're much more easily reversed because the earth is not like that. If you screw it over so much that you ruin humanity, you don't really have the ability to undo that. And unlike those issues, it doesn't kind of splash you in the face as much because it's not as immediate. You think about climate change or you think about any environmental degradation, it happens kind of slowly but surely. So you don't notice it on a day-to-day level. If you have 1 million new immigrants in a country, you'll notice. If you have 1 million less immigrants in the country, you'll notice. If you don't take care of your planet for 10 years, it's a little harder to notice. And I think that we're at risk right now of going down the wrong path in a way that's harder to reverse.
And I mean, you've kind of talked about this, but there are inherently like political solutions that we need to address a lot of these things. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you still would identify as a conservative.
Nope.
And an environmentalist. No. Okay. What's the big news, Benji? No more conservative environmentalists?
Look, I wrote the book behind me that says The Conservative Environmentalist, and I'm proud of a lot of the beliefs that I still have that lean conservative. But the reality is I've just completely come to the conclusion that the political boxes are bullshit, that there's just right or wrong. And the right gets a lot wrong, and the left gets a lot wrong, and the right gets a lot right, and the left gets a lot right. That does not make me a liberal or conservative. I want to be an American who cares about the environment and is wanting to build a better, healthier, more prosperous nation and world. That's what I want to be known as. And I don't want to be known as somebody who's put in a box, because when you say you're a conservative or a liberal, there's all these assumptions that people have of you that may or may not be true. I know conservatives who are vegan, my parents. I know liberals who drive big old trucks. I know liberals who go shooting every weekend and are hunters. And I know conservatives who would never even think about touching a gun in their lives. And yet, if you say that you're a conservative, the assumption is that you love guns and that you've got 1 million of them in your house and that you might actually shoot somebody. And the assumption of liberals is that you're a weak person who would never own a gun ever because you're just a hippie liberal.
And you must drive a Prius, also that.
Who drives a Prius. And I drive a plug-in hybrid vehicle. And what does that make me? A liberal? I don't know. So I think we have to get out of this mindset. And I think when I identified as a conservative for the last 16 years of my life or whatever, we were living in a different political age where I don't think people had such rigid stereotypes that they thought both sides held. And I don't want to play that game. And I think it's, the game of stereotypes and boxes is sort of ruining the country.
When you talk to people who would still identify as a conservative, people who voted for President Trump, but who care about nature, who care about our environment, how do they square those two things? Or what is that conversation like?
What's interesting that people maybe wouldn't realize is that Donald Trump's lowest approval rating during his first term on any issue was his environmental approval rating. So what I see about the environment is that we have this huge constituency of Americans who care deeply about the environment. And they're right, left, center, whatever you want to call them. There's a huge winning coalition that we haven't tapped into of Americans who deeply care. Now, unfortunately, we haven't tapped into them. And so we haven't been able to hold leaders accountable to take sensible action. When the left goes far left on the environment, they get applauded by the far left groups because those groups exist. If you're a center left, center right person and you do good things, you don't get any credit at all because there's really not very many like middle of the road environmental groups right now that are loud and vocal. And then if you do something bad on the far right, no one really holds you accountable on your own side because a lot of people on the right don't see themselves as part of the environmental movement, even though they care deeply, as I'm saying, with the polling and the data. So there's a disconnect. And that's why Nature's Nonpartisan exists, is because there needs to be a movement that allows the ranchers and the farmers and the hunters and the foresters and the people who love the environment to be on the same team as those who are hippie, Prius-driving liberals and everyone in between. The environmental movement in America used to embody that. And so it's not like some pipe dream that I have. Like that's what the environmental movement was in the 1980s and 1990s. And that's why you had every president, Republican and Democrat, lead on the environment back to back. The Republicans who led on the environment, like Richard Nixon, creating the EPA and the Endangered Species Act. But it wasn't just him. It's not like the parties flipped. The Democrats were doing the same thing. And we have to get back to that being the norm. And we won't until there's a cultural movement that sort of shows politicians that that's what's needed. And so the challenge that we face right now is that we have the winning coalition, but the leaders don't hear it. And so if Donald Trump doesn't prioritize the environment, he might have it be one of his lowest approval rating issues, but he doesn't feel the ramifications of that. That system of risk and reward needs to change.
And the only thing I would challenge you a little bit on is like, I don't even view this as a coalition. I think it is every American. Like, do you know anyone who wants to breathe dirty air or go to a river that's polluted, like, or go hiking through woods and there's trash everywhere and you've like clear cut a forest? Like,
no, but there's a lot of people
agree.
who are ignorant is the problem, because there's a lot of people who I know who are pushing for stuff that does create that because they don't see it and they're not affected by it. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And so I think anybody would hate that. But if you're a Washington, D.C. swamp creature who lives all their days there and you think that the environment's protected enough, it's good. Whenever I go to I'm a lobbyist, I go to my house in Aspen once a year and it looks good over there, so everything must be fine. Then you're willing to push for stuff that isn't good for the environment because you're kind of shielded from the realities that exist. There are some people who would be shocked if they went to like Cancer Alley in the Southeast, or they went to where the Palisades fire was, or they went to anywhere in the summer that gets burned up by forest fires, or they saw the degradation of the Mississippi River that's happening right now that people aren't talking enough about, where all the ecosystem is pretty much gone because the runoff from pesticides has ruined the ecosystem. Like, but people don't see that. So then they create policies where like, well, the environment's fine, so why can't we just do more? And I think that you're right that no one actually wants to screw over the environment, but a lot of them are ignorantly doing it.
And so you hope, I imagine, to fix that with this organization you launched early 2025, Nature's Nonpartisan. For people who don't know about it, what's your elevator pitch? What is the organization? What are you up to?
We're building America's 21st century conservation movement. Fishing, bird watching, breathing, living. In 2026, out is in. This year, we're going outside. And we're going to do that in a way that's relevant and fun to be a part of. So what I mean by that is doing it in a cultural way. So not like sign this petition and we're going to tell policymakers and we'll keep you posted. It's like, no, we want people to show up and advocate for what they care about in a way that makes it fun. And so for like public lands, for example, it's pretty clear that public lands are under threat more than they have been really in any other time in the last century.
2/3 of National Park Service employees are now furloughed.
There's been threats of sell-off. There's been threats of massive economic development on them. There's been threats of undoing public lands designations and selling them off to the highest bidder. And so we want to tell leaders that that's a no-go. We're literally going to have 50 people dressed up as park rangers going around, wandering around New York City. There's not any national parks in New York City, obviously, and so trying to kind of capture people's attention, like what in the world's going on? Why are these people here? And draw attention in the most populated part of the country to a really big problem, which is that our public lands are not being protected, they're not being funded, and they're not being maintained. And doing it in a way that captures people's attention is kind of the goal.
And so obviously you'll raise a lot of awareness doing this, but what's the other benefit from doing this? Like what's the other good that's coming from it?
Well, we're gonna have a 2-month campaign where people can protect what's theirs, which is their stake in the national parks. They can rally their friends and family to get a share in their favorite public land, or maybe you want to go against your sister or brother and choose a different public land that you love to enjoy. And by the end of the campaign, we're going to pick a winner in each of the categories of public land that our country has. But most importantly, each share that someone grabs will be automatically sent to legislators to make sure that they hear the voices of Americans who want them to protect and maintain our public lands. So it's kind of a fun way for people to take action.
Before we talk about what's next, I'm curious though, in the little over a year that this has been up and running, what do you think's the biggest thing you've learned that maybe you didn't expect going into it?
That everyone in politics would hate it because
Oh, God.
because it challenges everything that they think is real. So the left thinks I'm a Trojan horse for the right, and the right thinks I'm a Trojan horse for the left. They think that there's some ulterior motive because they can't fathom. No one can fathom in the political world that it's possible. It could be possible that somebody has a good intention to bring Americans together for the environment. Like no one can even fathom that in the political world because they're surrounded by such negativity and hatred and polarization every single day. And I guess I didn't think that that would be the reaction. And I'm not talking about the general public because the general public hasn't really had that reaction, but senators, lobbyists, special interest groups, other nonprofits, they've all assumed the worst. And they've tried to come after us for things that have not been real. I mean, the amount of conspiracy theories about me in the last year has been insane. And we don't even have like a massive platform. That has been just shocking to me. And honestly has made it really hard because it doesn't affect me as much as it used to, but it affects the team. It affects the board. It affects the people around it. And it hurts the momentum, which is probably what these people are trying to do. We shall beat those pesky, polarizing, hateful people that are actually actively ruining our country. And they also happen to be the people who are in power and have influence.
Benji, that's tough, but it also makes me think that with that kind of reaction that you're on the right track. What's right isn't always popular. You know, they say like it's only at the top because like sometimes getting there is a difficult thing, or you get this kind of pushback because you are trying to like fundamentally change something about our country.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I think I want to believe that, and I do believe that. It's kind of one of those, it seems like a lot of people throughout history who had big, bold ideas started out and everyone thought they were everyone was skeptical. No one thought it was possible, whether that be a crazy business that someone started like Apple or, we're going to create a smartphone that everyone can use every single day. And people are like, you're crazy. Or if it's like Teddy Roosevelt, when he proposed the national park system, he got so much hate because people were like, what? You want to like completely destroy economic development in our country and just put these wide swaths of land to not be touched so people can like go walking? So people sounded crazy before it wasn't crazy. And I'm just hoping that someday people will look back and say, Benji, you weren't that crazy, because right now they think I am. And, we'll just have to find out. Am I really that crazy? We'll see.
I mean, I feel like you're crazy in a good way, but, it's because we agree on a lot of this. But, what you're describing also reminds me of something I actually just said in a video that I posted a few days ago, which from Joanna Macy, like legendary environmentalist and author. And she said, important changes go through 3 phases. First, they're treated as a joke. Then they're treated as a threat. And then finally, they become accepted as normal. So sounds like we're in that second phase, that we're in that like threat phase, maybe just before this is not just normal, but it's expected that we care for nature, that we care for our planet.
Well, I hope that's true, because it's been a year of, I think we very quickly went from joke to threat. And a lot of legacy environmental groups feel threatened because we're showing that it's possible to get out of the echo chamber and talk to people on the other side, and that people aren't as against them as they claimed they were. And then people on the right are super, super, and I'm talking about the far right and the far left. They feel like the far right feels like we are basically against everything that they're for. And people are trying to ruin us every single day. They're trying to threaten to come after our tax status. They're trying to, create conspiracy videos about us. They're telling the White House not to meet with us. There's a lot of stuff happening that I think shows that you're right, that we're not in step 1, we're in step 2. And that leap to step 3 is probably the hardest, right? Because we have to prove that we can win. And we have the odds stacked against us. We live in a partisan system. That's where the money goes. We live in a polarized system. That's where the money goes. As you know, and I know, posts on social media about anything that's not polarizing don't even show up on people's feeds. So we have the odds kind of stacked against us, but so did everybody else that changed the world. So
Really what we're talking about is like, you're not just trying to change politics, like you're trying to change culture. And I was reading something the other day. It was an old interview from the former CEO of IBM. And he said, culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. But how do you change culture in a country that is so big and diverse like ours?
You represent them. My dream is to have ranchers speak to ranchers about the importance of conservation, to have hikers speak to hikers, to have religious people talk to religious people. Because everyone's reason is different for caring about the environment. If you live in the Midwest, your reason is different versus the South. If you are religious, it's different than if you're not religious. And I'm not going to pretend that I can speak for everybody because I'm a white man from Wisconsin originally who loves to spend his weekends hiking and skiing and believes in bipartisanship. If you sort of overlap with those things, it might speak to you to listen to me. But if you don't, then that's not really helpful because we might have the same goal, but I don't look or talk or sound like a lot of people. And so my goal is to kind of create an Avengers of people who believe in the environment and are fighting together side by side, who believe the same things and just come from different walks of life. And that's why we're launching programs that sort of show that in real time. And that's the thought behind a lot of our campaigns and initiatives coming up. So I don't believe ranchers, farmers, environmentalists, any of these people are inherently bad, and they all have really valid cases to why they care about what they care about. And we need to strike a balance between those things. Like, we need ranching and farming because that's how our country feeds and sustains itself. But we can't just ranch and farm everywhere and destroy the land. And so there's a balance there. And so you can benefit the ranchers and the farmers, and you can benefit the land, and there's a way to do it. But if the ranchers and farmers feel vilified, or you over-index on, saying anything goes and kind of vilify the environmentalists, then you lose them. And so that's the challenge that I think we have in front of us, is how do we best accurately represent the Americans who do care about this in a way that actually gets them to the table, not just me saying it on a video recording with you, but actually living it day to day.
And that's really the why behind this next big campaign you're launching, United by Nature. Tell me about that.
Well, we're a United States, or we should be, and we are united by nature, or we should be. I mean, like I said, geography, religion, racial background, we all rely on nature and we are united by it. I know it sounds cliche, but like the trees, the animals, they really don't care what election's happening. They just want to be able to to stay healthy and survive. And the same same is true for our ecosystem. So that's how we need to build the environmental movement, is to have it be something that people do feel like they have a stake in and that they're united by. And we feel like that's going to be the face. The United by Nature campaign is going to be the new face of the environmental movement. That's our goal. Because right now, when people hear the word climate, or they hear the word environmentalist, or they hear the word environmental movement, I guess that's 2 words, they think of a lot of things like you would if you heard the word conservative. Going back to that, a lot of stereotypes. And you think of a certain type of person, a certain type of being. And what I want people to think about when they think about the climate is the climate. What I want people to think about when they hear the word environment is the environment, and not think of polarizing political figures that they don't like, or the fact that the policies are really bad, or that the country's headed in the wrong direction, or all these kind of there's a lot of baggage, positive and negative, around these words depending on who you talk to. But if we're united by nature and we're staying together and fighting for that, and we have a movement of people who believe that inherently, then we can start to destigmatize it, and leaders will want to act. As you pointed out, culture is downstream of politics. Politics is downstream of culture. So politics is dictated by where the culture goes. So if the culture is focused on the environment, our leaders will act. But we need a winning coalition of people to make that happen. And we won't do that if we just have the echo chamber of the current environmental community. And so United by Nature allows for a new community to be built, which will include those traditional environmentalists, but it'll also include brand new audiences that haven't felt represented in a long time.
I mean, it's bringing people together, which is also what you did in this new YouTube series you're launching. I'm really fascinated by this. Around a fire pit.
And I love an unlikely duo. I think that's what we need. I think the world needs Brett Cooper and Pattie Gonia.
What's the idea? What's this going to look like?
So it's called the fire pit. You know, we're very clear on how we name things here. Nature is nonpartisan, pretty clear. United by nature, pretty clear. The fire pit, pretty clear. We are gathering two unlikely people in what we hope will be the #1 environmental show in the country, other than yours, of course, where
we can be tied for first.
Right, we can be tied. Yeah, we'll have the exact same number of viewers, where two unlikely people sit down together over a campfire to talk about life, the world itself, their lives, and the environment. And each show will have a sort of a focus of forest health or national parks or climate or whatever it is. And you're going to have some crazy combinations of people that you would never expect. So drag queens and conservatives, Mormons and tribal leaders, ranchers and Democrat members of Congress, people who you just would never think could sit down together.
They are no doubt formidable enemies, but today they're going to have to put their differences aside to fix the planet.
And then you're going to learn that they're not so different after all.
I'm allergic to cats and sesame seeds.
What about gluten?
Gluten is fine. I'm not that type of liberal.
Oh, I got probably the lowest IQ of anybody here, but I'm probably one of the better hunters of anybody here.
If there was an apocalypse, I would die immediately. You would survive and outlive us. I need a friend that could survive an apocalypse. I currently do not have one.
Is this how we bring liberals and conservatives together, just like a post-apocalyptic situation?
Maybe that's how we solve it.
And you're going to see them disagree too. I mean, and I think that that's what we need is healthy disagreement. But at the end, you're going to see that they can shake hands. They might even hug. They might even cry over the campfire together because they appreciate each other so much. I mean, what we found with the first 6 episodes that we recorded was that it was actually very emotional for a lot of people, because they obviously showed up to record this thinking that it might be possible to sit down over the campfire with someone they disagree with. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have shown up. But even given that, people couldn't believe the impact and the positive influence that had on themselves and how it broke a lot of stereotypes within themselves. And we had, even the camera crew is just emotional. I mean, it just was a really powerful first 6 episodes.
I'm sure there were tons of these moments, but is there one moment that like really got you where these two people who are really disagreeing and they have that like epiphany of like, wait, we agree on this? Like, what was the moment that stuck with you?
So what's interesting is we've crafted this to be all in person because I feel like that's critical and it's more expensive and it's harder to pull off. But most of the epiphanies happened before they got on stage or around the campfire together, where they had to share a meal together or they had to talk to each other at the filming location, and they're kind of forced to get to know each other beforehand. None of these people knew each other before they showed up in Utah, which is where we filmed the first episodes. But by the time they went on around the campfire, they were fast friends. And a perfect example of this, and I can't get too specific, otherwise people are going to know who I'm talking about.
Well, we can play a clip, right? I think we can add a clip.
Right, they would be so upset at me for saying this. There was a person who flew in, had a really long travel day, and realized that they were paired with somebody that they didn't want to be paired with, even though we had alerted them weeks prior. The person who was upset about it threatened to go home and was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be paired with this person. And there was a bunch of reasons why. Then this person, before they were going to fly home, went to grab a meal at the house that the other guest was at, and they shared a meal together. And by the end of the meal, this guest came up to me and said, Benji, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. I love this person. I totally misjudged them. I totally misunderstood them. I cast a bunch of assumptions on them that weren't real. Tearing up. This has really opened my eyes. And can you please put us back together? Because we were starting to shuffle them around to try to figure out a different combination. They had the most inspiring conversation possible around the campfire. And if you watch all 6 episodes and the one that you're most inspired by, it's probably this one. Because this person was literally about to get on the plane to leave, shared a meal with this person, and now they're working together, now they're friends, now they're like staying in touch, they both are like talking a lot, and it's just a perfect example of what is possible here.
I mean, Benji, like that's so exciting to hear you say that, because it's like, remember when we talk to each other, remember when we talked to people that we disagreed with? Like,
Yeah, and the problem, Chase, is that I say that to people and they're like, yeah, that sounds nice, but that side sucks. Or, like, it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to do that because this side wants me killed, or this side wants me to not have rights, or, whatever. But I've known for a long time that that's not true. But I can't just tell somebody that, right? Like, that's not going to convince them. So this show not only is going to destigmatize the environment, but it's meant to show people what we're missing about society in general, which is the ability to talk to each other again, but in a very hyper-specific way. It's like, no, this isn't some vague, like, oh, we can all kumbaya and get along. This is like real. This is actually happening. And they're talking about real things. They're talking about sex. They're talking about religion. They're talking about the environment. They're talking about everything. And they're hugging at the end. So yes, it is possible. And I think showing that instead of even just saying that is going to be the power in this.
I imagine there's also going to be like that lesson or that takeaway for people watching this of like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe my relative who I really disagree with on politics, like maybe I should actually talk to them when I'm home for a family dinner or holiday. Right?
Exactly.
I think that's the takeaway you want, right? Is like remembering to talk to each other.
Right, and ask the questions with curiosity. So we have the host of this show is a comedian, pretty famous comedian on YouTube.
Who is it?
Jake,
Just let's.
Jake.
Okay.
His handle is man carrying thing. He's hilarious. So he kept it lighthearted, but it's almost like going into it, you knew that you weren't. This wasn't supposed to be some vicious debate. And he kind of leads with the division. Like in the earliest stages of one of the conversations, he's like, "So Hillary, who's a former Democrat elected official from Washington, you're a elitist liberal from Washington, aren't you?" And you're just kind of like leaning into it from the start. And there's a comedian paired up with the CEO of a major hunting organization who's trying to restore deer in the Southwest. And instead of going to him with the first question, going to the hunting CEO, he turns to the comedian and says, "Beth, can you tell me why deer populations in the West are declining and why that's so important?" And she has no idea how to answer that question. And so then she automatically has to start conversing. And so it's just really a fun way to get these people talking and kind of leaning into the uncomfortableness right away.
I mean, I was also so excited to see that Pattie Gonia, the drag queen you mentioned, is in one of the episodes. Love Pattie Gonia's drag and her work. But when I was watching this, I was like, I wonder, did Pattie try to like get Benji in drag at any point?
Pattie did try that. Pattie also
what did you say?
That
did you say
everyone's
no?
in drag, that I'm in drag all the time because I'm just dressing up as who I want to be versus my true self. And I'm like, I don't know. Right now I'm wearing a Ramblin' Man hat and a shirt with a bunch of saguaros on it. I think this is exactly where I need to be, but we'll see.
I don't know.
But I'm down to dress up in
now.
drag once. You got to try everything once.
Do you have a drag name?
I can't even think of my real name. It's been that long of a day. Maybe it has to be nature centric. Like
I got it. You ready?
Okay.
Or do you have one?
No, go.
Amber Waves.
Amber Waves.
Amber Waves of Grain.
That's good. That is good.
We'll workshop it.
And there's no, I like it because it has a double meaning. Waves like the ocean, waves of grain, American heartland, amber.
Maybe you just wave at people a lot.
I wave at people. Amber waves, sure.
All right. Well, if you come up with a better name,
I'll tell Pattie.
Tell Pattie. I want to see Benji in drag. So Benji, a lot of exciting work. Hopefully people will follow United by Nature, follow Nature is Nonpartisan, get engaged in this. But for people watching this who obviously care about the environment, they care about nature, they're not still with us this far into a conversation. What is the one thing, what's the biggest thing that they can do to make a difference?
I think it's an engage in your biggest issue locally. So every part of this country has a environmental issue that's becoming worse. So if you live in the Great Lakes, it's some of the water quality issues, whether that be drinking water or the rivers. If you live in the Southwest, it's the lack of water and it's kind of the urban heat island effect and some of the issues with trapping heat in Phoenix. So getting active on some of those local issues, we're not going to chew off all the big environmental issues overnight. And there's not enough activism at the local level. Something that our organization is going to help do is connect people to those local initiatives. We're probably a year or two away from building out that full program. So until then, find the local organizations that are working on the issues that matter to you and get involved. And then over time, our goal is to become really synergetic with those groups and help amplify their work.
And I would also just add, I'm answering my own question, but talk about this.
Right.
There's a lot more agreement than people realize. Don't let the polarization
talk about it if
scare
you're
you
not
into not talking
normally.
about it.
Yeah, talk about it if you're not normal. If you're not known as an environmental activist, that makes you even more important because you're destigmatizing it for everyone around you.
The Ramblin' Man, Benji Backer. Thank you. Such fun conversation.
Thanks for letting me ramble.
Yeah, it was great.